Today we're going to talk about a tricky situation which every leader will probably face and should face head on. Staff who seem like they're in the wrong job. Maybe they're consistently frustrated, their performance is slipping, or they just don't seem that engaged. It can be quite tempting to point fingers, but before you do, let's explore some strategies that could help both you and your team. The problem is that if an individual is in the wrong role, it'll be quite miserable for them and frustrating for everybody else because it can zap morale, impact productivity, and create a whole lot of unnecessary stress. So how do you know if somebody in your team is in the wrong job? Well, I have seen this a few too many times over the years, and I've identified a couple of red flags that kind of give away the fact that the individual probably isn't where they should be. Number one is if they're surrounded by a bit of a vibe of negativity. Now, don't go jumping in quite yet. I've done a video linked on your screen about how everybody has a bit of an off day, including yourself if you are a leader, where they just don't feel it and need a few tips and tricks to get them through. So watch that before you go leaping in around the negativity vibe. In the meantime, if there is someone in your team that is constantly complaining about tasks or the team or environment that surrounds them, keep your eyes open. They may be a candidate as a staff member who isn't quite in the right place. Another sign is missed deadlines and lagging performance. Perhaps their output is dropping and they're struggling to meet expectations. Or are they showing signs of a lack of engagement, seeming disengaged or disconnected, and lacking any kind of enthusiasm for what's in front of them? Perhaps they are making the most basic of errors and appear to be struggling in things that they did quite easily previously. Now, before you reach for the termination papers, which would actually be completely jumping the gun, if you haven't gone through a process of coaching, informing, noting things down, setting expectations, etc., etc. Let's talk about some solutions. There are some quite proactive ways that you can approach the situation. The first one is to have an honest conversation. Schedule a one-on-one chat or work it into your hopefully already well-established coaching schedule. Again, another video linked on your screen, all about why consistent coaching really matters as a leader. But I'll move on. In this one-on-one conversation, ask open-ended questions. Questions about their experience, any challenges that they might be facing, and what generally is going on for them at the moment. They may open up with a personal situation, which actually highlights it's nothing to do with work and their happiness or otherwise in the role. So be prepared for some active listening and keep an open mind. But once you have heard from them and they have answered all of your open-ended questions, you need to provide them with your own observations of what you have seen and observed, and keep it to the facts. Examples are a very good idea. Show how what you're seeing has impacted on their performance or their colleagues or their atmosphere, and make sure that they understand that this is different from your expectations, which again, hopefully was set long time ago and this is not news to them. If they weren't, and actually you've never really clearly declared what your expectations of them are, you're probably actually going to have to do that, put that in place, monitor it, and then give them a chance to show you that they can meet those first. But otherwise, let's keep going. Now, provided that little one-on-one chat hasn't deviated into a dramatic personal life situation, go through a bit of a strengths and skills inventory. Help them identify what their strengths and skills are that they are bringing to the role. Is there anything in that package of strengths and skills that perhaps shows another opportunity or something that they actually enjoy much more than other parts of what's happening in their role? Sometimes what happens is we start on one career track and then we deviate into something quite different, and through this we discover, oh, actually what I'm really good at is something completely different, like being a race car driver. And this whole idea of going as fast as I can to work and getting speeding tickets probably isn't getting me to that goal. It's also important to cover off any skills or upskilling that they may require in their current role to actually keep them up to speed with what they need to be doing. Do they have all the skills that they need and the training that supports them to do their job? Perhaps you can invest in developing them or sending them on a training course to fill a gap. This is actually one of the most common reasons for a lack of performance. People that actually genuinely don't know how to do a task, and then they sit back because they're thinking, well, I've been here for at least 6 months and I definitely should have asked about this by now, so I'm just going to try and do it even though I suck at it, and hopefully no one will notice. This will obviously create a whole lot of anxiety for your person and manifests itself as looking like somebody who can't do their job or isn't interested in their job. And actually, a quick training course would fix the whole problem. So make sure you cover this one off. So perhaps in this one-on-one conversation, you discover that it isn't some massive personal situation that's impacting them. Their strengths and skills align with the role and where they want to go with their career, and they are fully competent in all the skills and training that is required of them on the job. But they are just a little bit bored and need a fresh challenge. If this is the case, explore with them some lateral moves that maybe can give them something that is a little bit different to keep them engaged. Perhaps there's a project that they could step into, or they could do a little bit of extra training on some other component of another piece of work that would also help. Keep in mind though, if you do land on giving them a project, generally this is only going to fill the gap temporarily, because at some point they're going to finish that project and then they're again going to be reaching for something else, or they're going to be bored and stagnant in their role. And if they weren't actually bored, they just aren't quite the right fit for the job, you will need to deal with that in the next step, which is considering how you're going to transition them out of what they're doing into something new. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Nikki. I've been in leadership for over 17 years and have gone from leading just 2 people to leading leaders of large teams. And I have had quite a few instances of having to run people through this process of determining whether they are quite the right fit for the job. I had one individual who was showing all the signs, and I have discovered there's a few common things that occur with people when they're not quite the right fit for the job. So in the scenarios that I've had, I've started with the steps that I've already described, and then when none of those were quite right and I landed on, okay, this really isn't quite right for you, is it? I would usually deviate into a conversation around, do you even recognize that this isn't quite right for you? Because sometimes that's a barrier too. They don't even notice. And so then my question would usually be around, how are you going to feel if you're still in this role, doing this job in a decade? Often the mention of a decade or some predetermined point in the future is enough to kind of make people think a little bit, oh, do I actually want to be here for a decade? And then I can follow up with questions around, well, what would you want to be doing? What do you like? What is it about the role that interests you? So a lot of open-ended coaching questions follow, helping them identify for themselves what they really want. Now you could end up with them determining that actually where I am right now is okay with me and I'm happy with that, and they have no ambition to pursue a different pathway despite being able to identify that their performance or behaviour is less than your expectations, in which case you'll need to hold their feet to the fire a little bit and reset those expectations about what you do require from them in their job. If they do recognise that staying in the role is not quite right for them right now, keep coaching them around what other opportunities they could be looking at. But it isn't actually your job to set them up with a new opportunity. You can guide them and coach them and help steer them in the right direction, but it's your job to actually lift performance and engagement with your own team. So you'll need to keep reinforcing those expectations until they do find a new role, which they need to proactively search for themselves. Now, if you've had the conversation, but you're actually making no headway at all, none of the above is sparking any kind of interaction that's getting you anywhere, or they've identified that actually a different role is something that they need to look into, but their performance is still average and they're still not really seeming like they're engaged weeks after the conversation, or even a week after the conversation, you really need to be digging into a performance conversation with them and how they are going to lift their performance so that it is matching with your expectations. and remind them that their low morale or their performance is impacting on the team. All fun stuff indeed. And a different video, which is linked on the screen for you to watch next. Tough Talks Mastered. Thanks very much for watching.